friends, Krista here. Thanks for stopping by Books and Jams. Today, I'm finally going to be doing a 5-star prediction follow-up. Earlier this year, I believe it was April, I chose 5 books off of my TBR cart, my recommendations cart. This year, you guys gave me a bunch of recommendations from my owned TBR list on Goodreads. And from that cart, I chose 5 books that I thought I would give 5 stars to. And I gotta say, I know my taste really well. I will get into each of the books and let you know my thoughts on them. Some of them I did wrap up in videos throughout the last few months, and some of them I didn't tell you. So if you paid attention along the way, you probably know my ratings for some of these. But I can say easily that I really loved each of these 5 books. So you guys know me well because you picked them for me to read this year. Let's just jump right in. The first one that I talked about was As Bright as Heaven by Susan Meisner. This is the first of 2 Susan Meisner books that I read this year, and I buddy read this one with Katie from Life Between Words on Instagram and Amanda from The Curly Reader here on BookTube and also on Instagram. And I love reading with those women. First of all, they're fantastic, and we had a lot of really good conversations about this book. And I had only read one Susan Meisner book before, but I really loved it, so I had high hopes that I would like this one. I was a little concerned because part of the storyline of here is that it takes place at the end of World War I when the Spanish flu hits, and I didn't know if reading this one would be a little too close to home and therefore make it a difficult read. However, I really loved it. I did give this book 5 stars. In this one, we follow this family who moves to Philadelphia in 1918, right in the midst of World War I. The father is joining his uncle, I believe, in the funeral business, undertaking and all of that. And the rest of the family's all girls, and they move along with him. We do follow the perspective of a couple of the sisters, 3 of the sisters, and the mother. So 4 different perspectives in this book. In each chapter, we follow a different perspective. And I think Susan Meisner did such a fantastic job of giving each character, each perspective, a very distinct voice. That's one of the very strong points I thought of this one. I was just so captivated by the story. I was engrossed in each of these characters. I found them believable. The story going on was eerily similar in a lot of ways to what was going on in our lives in the midst of our current pandemic, which was just really interesting to read about. I teared up at certain points, and I thought that this was a fantastic reading experience, and I am a big fan of Susan Meisner. I have quite a few of her books in a pile right here, so I have quite a few more of hers to read, and I'm excited about that because I really loved this one for sure. Yeah, that was a 5-star read. Well done, me. The second one that I talked about is The Invention of Wings by Sue Monk Kidd, and I did read this as part of my Goodreads read-along group a couple months ago. And in this one, we follow Sarah Grimke, who is a real-life character, and a slave girl that she is given on her 11th birthday named Hetty, or Handful. We follow these 2 women throughout a couple decades of their lives, and Sarah's storyline is based on true events. She and her sister end up becoming a big part of the abolitionist movement, and as well as the women's suffrage movement, are speakers for both of those things in their lifetimes. And so that is a definite part of this story. And also Hetty, or Handful, is a real character, but in real life she dies at a young age, and in this story she doesn't. So her growing up life is imagined. I really loved about this one, and I don't think I talked about this in my wrap-up of it, but one of the aspects of this book is the relationship between Hetty and her mother, and their desire for freedom, and their, at the core of them, their knowledge that they should be free, and how that plays out in both of their lives. I loved the quilting that they do. They're both seamstresses, and that is their job in this household. But the mother in particular creates this quilt that's like a story quilt of her life. And I just found that to be so interesting, and did a little bit of research about quilts made by slave women. It just was very interesting to me. I did end up giving this one 4 stars rather than 5. I think because I read it right after another book that I'll talk about in a minute that really captivated me in a very strong and intense way. And this one was super interesting, and I really liked how it was written and the 2 perspectives that we follow, but I wasn't emotionally connected to either of the two characters. There were things about them that was very frustrating, or things about this situation and that was very frustrating. And I think that's a good thing, to be frustrated when you read a book about slavery, because it just was so difficult to read at times. But I didn't get that full like heart connection, I guess, with the story that I like to have in my 5-star reads. And that's just a personal preference. I know so many people have given this one such high ratings, but I really did like this one. And I mean, it was a 4-star read. That's really good. So good. The one that I was just talking about, though, is The Alice Network by Kate Quinn. And I did give this one 5 stars. This one had an intensity. It packed a punch for sure. There was a couple scenes that I just could not put down the book. It was so brutal at times. And let me back up. So in this one, we follow this female network of spies called the Alice Network in World War I and World War II. We follow 3 people in particular, but mainly these 2 women. Eve Gardner, in with the World War I storyline, becomes a spy and has to go undercover. And she has to deal with some pretty intense and brutal, I've said those words already, experiences as a spy that impact her greatly in moving into the future. And then we also have like about 45-50 years later, in the heart of World War II, or just at the end of World War II, where we have Charlie Sinclair, who's a young woman who is on the hunt for a cousin of hers who disappeared during the war. And she goes and reaches out to Eve to help her track down her cousin. And so these 2 women's lives become intertwined, and we learn about Eve's story as we're also following their current journey, because they kind of parallel and overlap a little bit. And we also have interspersed with that this young man who works with Eve. So this was very intense and very graphic in certain ways, and I just couldn't put it down. It was very moving and very, very good. I loved it. Gave it 5 stars. I know myself well. I love a war story. I know there's so many out there. I just can't resist them. The next one that I talked about in that original predictions video was The Kite Runner by Khaled Hosseini. I'm sorry that I can't say that very well. This one I just read last month, and I listened to it and had to stop a couple times to sit down and cry while I was listening. Oh my goodness. This one definitely packs a punch and is very emotional. It takes place in Afghanistan, and we follow mainly this young boy named Amir. Well, at the beginning, he's a boy, and his buddy, his friend, also his servant, this other boy that he spends a lot of time with, their fathers are were best friends growing up and practically brothers. But these 2 boys get into a predicament at one point that is pretty traumatic. Well, this servant boy gets into a situation that is pretty traumatic, and Amir witnesses it but doesn't do anything about it. His lack of action at that moment when this trauma happened affects him throughout his life, and we follow him through a couple decades as he moves away from Afghanistan, and we see how this grief and regret impacts him into his future relationship with his father and with his wife. Throughout all of that, we also learn a lot about Afghanistan and the changes that happen throughout the history of Afghanistan during this time period, the wars that are fought, the different political situations as the Taliban takes over, and it's just, it was very informative, very engaging. I mean, I couldn't stop reading this. I was very interested all the way through. The writing was beautiful. There were some twists that I did not remember. Like, it just kept packing another punch and hitting me again and hitting me again. And I was so sad. And it was very emotional. And I loved it. I'm so glad that I read this. I have 2 other books by him on my shelves, and I'm very interested in reading them now, but definitely gave this one 5 stars as well. So good. So far 3 out of 4 that I talked about, I gave 5 stars. And the last one that I originally predicted would be a 5-star read is The Giver of Stars by Jojo Moyes. Guess what, guys? I also gave this one 5 stars. I told you, I know myself so well. I had read first The Book Woman of Troublesome Creek. about pack horse librarians in the Appalachian Mountains of Kentucky, and I loved it. And people kept saying that they liked this one even better, which also is a story of pack horse librarians. And so I knew if people are saying this is even better than Bookwoman of Troublesome Creek, that I was just gonna love it. And I did. And it does follow this group of women who are pack horse librarians. We mainly follow Alice, who is a British woman. She's from England and marries an American and comes back with him, Bennett. And Bennett is just not quite the same when they return home to Kentucky. He is a little bit of a pushover. His dad rules the roost, and his dad is not a very kind man. And so Alice had been quite disillusioned and begins work as a pack horse librarian as a way to get out of the house, as a way to find something that is hers in this new land that she has to now call home. And in the process, we meet this other group of women who are also pack horse librarians, and they are a strong, loyal, fierce group of women, each of them dealing with their own issues as they live in this poverty-stricken, harsh climate, mountainous land. And in the midst of all of this, there is a murder that happens, and one of the women is accused of the murder. And so it was just so beautiful to see these women kind of band together, each of them with their different backgrounds, and they don't all get along at the beginning, but the way that they support one another and stand up for each other and fight for each other was just really beautiful. I loved this book so much. I loved it so much. I don't remember if I cried or not. I pretty much cried every book, so I probably did. But I just remember that I just loved this group of women and how they grew together throughout the course of the story. It was just so good. It was so good. So yeah, guys, out of my 5 predictions, 4 of them were 5-star reads. Here they are. I can't believe it. I did so good predicting for myself. I would love to hear from you. Have you read any of these? Did you also give them 5 stars? What did you think about them? Do you think differently than me? That's cool too. I would love to chat about it down in the comments below. As you know, I love talking with you down there. Let's chat about these books or anything else that you want to talk about. Give this video a big thumbs up if you liked it. Subscribe if you haven't already. And I will be talking to you in another video very soon. Bye.